Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to continue our exploration of Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, which is happening in March of 2023. Now, this is part two. Last week I looked at, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, I looked at Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, and we talked about this concept of emptying or kenosis. So if you missed that, you could go back and look at that video to get another take on Pluto's entrance into Aquarius. I'm trying to cover Pluto's entrance into Aquarius from multiple different angles. Some of this is probably a little bit familiar too, because I mentioned some of these things when we talked about Saturn's entrance into Aquarius. And I do think there are some differences, but largely today, what I want to talk about is the water bearer. Who is the water bearer? What is a water bearer? And we're going to explore that today. And as we unpack what a water bearer is and who is this figure in the constellation of Aquarius, there are three implications that I want to talk about, three implications that come from an understanding of who the water bearer is in terms of the history of this beautiful constellation of Aquarius. So that's what we're going to get into today. Before we do that, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel to grow. Really appreciate when you guys do that. You can find a transcript of any of my daily talks on the website. If you want to reread something that I've said on video or through the podcast, that's nightlightastrology.com. I also want to just let everybody know, I'm kind of saying this once in a while, watch out for scammers, whether it's in the YouTube comments section or on Instagram. There are impersonators who impersonate my account, and they'll reach out and say, hey, I've got a special feeling about you. Can I do a reading for you or something like that? The only way that I do readings for people is if they book it through my website, and I will never DM you for a reading. So I'd just like to say that so that no one's getting taken advantage of out there. It's unfortunate that these people are doing this, not only to myself, but to many other astrologers and content creators in general. So just something to watch out for. Sometimes they'll hit you up, contact me on WhatsApp. They'll do that in the comments section sometimes of my YouTube videos as well. So just be on the lookout for that. I don't want anyone getting taken advantage of. I also want to take you over to my website, nightlightastrology.com, because my new course is starting and I am really excited about it. For me, I've had some pretty big personal changes lately, as most of you know, changing my name and just kind of the astrology's been working on me very personally as of late. This talk today, in fact, is a lot of the notes from this talk came as I was reflecting on Saturn's transit through Aquarius. At any rate, through any time that I'm going through something, I'm always really excited to dive into my new course or whatever the next enrollment period is, because when I'm feeling renewed and there's fresh insights, it has the effect of transforming and enhancing the curriculum I teach. So I'm really excited for this new unit because I just feel really re-inspired right now. And I'm usually at my best as a teacher when that happens. So this course starts on November 12th. It's called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It is a one-year dive into Hellenistic ancient astrology with an eye for teaching you how to read birth charts. And this is the first of 2 years worth of programming you can get into. But the first year is a great place to start in terms of just learning the fundamentals when it comes to reading birth charts, the ancient philosophy and history, and also all of the techniques that ancient astrologers had. And as we go, we pay special attention to how to create the divinatory space of a reading, which means how do we artfully use these techniques in service of whatever is coming up during the actual course of a reading. So toward the end of the class, we actually have a lot of people come in, live clients that I read for, so that we can talk not only about techniques and theory and philosophy, but also how do you use them artfully in service to a soul who is sitting in front of you with a question or a series of issues that they're dealing with. Anyway, the class starts on November 12th. They're all 2 to 3 hours each. There's 30 classes on the year. We have a discussion forum for students that is staffed with tutors. They'll always answer your questions within 24 hours. You can email me throughout the course anytime. It starts, I think I said, it starts on November 12th. We also have breakout study sessions so that in between major units of study, we spend 12 hours on the houses. You get an afternoon of 2 to 3 hours of review with my staff as well. So it's a great program. At the bottom of the page, you're going to find out how to sign up. The early bird payment saves you $500 off. Use that soon because it only lasts up until before the start of class. It expires, and so you have to use it prior to the start of class in November to get a break on the tuition. There's also 12-month installment plans. You can spread the tuition out over 12 monthly payments. And then we have need-based tuition, which is ideal for people who are on a tight budget and you don't want to break the bank. You have to stay within that budget. We understand that, and we don't want astrology to price people. We don't want it to be a thing that prices people out, because this is sacred and anyone should have access to something that can transform you inside and out. And I believe that deeply. That's why I've been doing need-based tuition or donation-based offerings for going on 13 years now. All right, well, let's get into Pluto and Aquarius today. I'm really excited to take another look at this transit. It's been on my mind a lot lately, and no surprise, as I've been having a very personal transit with Saturn in Aquarius opposing my ascendant ruler, Venus in Leo. So it's been an opportunity for me to reflect quite a bit on Aquarius. I honestly feel like I'm understanding more about Aquarius. And it always happens that way. When you get a personal transit, you start, if you're an astrologer, that is the best material. I always tell my students, like, there's no substitute for transits when it comes to understanding and learning the astrology that you're studying in class. I mean, reading for people and learning from people's stories, that's huge. But also living the astrology, there's just no substitute for that. So I have a lot of reflections that have been coming up about Aquarius, some of which are not new, but they're deepening quite a bit. At any rate, here's Pluto entering Aquarius on March 23rd of 2023. It's going to back out, so we only get a little brief stay. Pluto goes into Aquarius from March till about June, and then it backs out into Capricorn again through its retrograde, and then it's sort of a little back and forth for a couple of years as Pluto's getting settled into a new sign. It then spends a long time, I think it's till like 2042, something pretty crazy like that we have a long, long stay. Now, I've been doing astrology for going on 13 years, and the entire time Pluto has been in Capricorn. So just from the standpoint of being a student of astrology, many of you listening to this channel, watching, taking in astrology, maybe you've been into astrology for a long time, but a lot of people probably, like myself even, I've been into it 12, 13 years, maybe a couple years before that I was into it studying, but not yet practicing. My adult life has been, as an astrologer, has been spent while Pluto has been in Capricorn. So the big thing is we are going to get such an opportunity this spring from March to June to realize, well, Pluto has a different, Pluto has a different personality. It's not just Capricorn. My God, So I think that alone makes it worth the price of admission. Like, this is going to be awesome. Now, one of the things that I think is also unique about this chart, by the way, is that as Pluto is ingressing into Aquarius, it will be at the midheaven over New York City. I mean, that's pretty powerful that it ingresses at, about 8:45 in the morning or so into Aquarius, and as it's doing so, it's pretty near the midheaven in New York City. Well, from a mundane astrological standpoint, that's got to be important. Not that I know exactly what that means, but that seems relevant. So maybe we'll come back to that in the spring, and sort of one of the things that we're going to do later is to look at previous eras in which Pluto was in Aquarius and just get a feel for what that was like. It's interesting to be tracking a planet whose like known history, like we don't, Pluto, we've only known about Pluto for, not as long as some of the previous Pluto sign transits. So it's going backward in time to visit previous eras where we didn't even know Pluto existed yet. So it's interesting from that standpoint as well. Anyway, I digress. What I want to do now is ask the question, who is the water bearer? And what are the implications related to that answer? Who is this water bearer in the constellation of Aquarius? This person pouring the pitcher is called the water bearer, sometimes called the water pourer, or even the cup bearer. Well, the mythology that is often related to the sign of Aquarius is that of Ganymede. And I talked about Ganymede a bit when Saturn was about to ingress into Aquarius. We're going to revisit that for a second, but go a little bit more deeply with it and propose some things that might be a little radical, but fitting for Aquarius. And in doing so, what I want to say is just that Pluto will bring such deep and powerful transformation through these themes. And so but before we can even say, like, well, what that means exactly, we have to understand what these themes are. So Ganymede is this brilliant, beautiful soul, a youthful boy. And Zeus, who's kind of like he's the king of the gods, the cosmocrat. And in a sense, for the ancient Greeks, he's a bit like the monotheistic god of the Christian tradition. There's a sense that Zeus is the omniscient, all-powerful. So Zeus is absolutely smitten with Ganymede, who's a human. This is a god that's smitten with a human. That's important. The Greeks played with this idea all the time that the gods love or desire something about human beings, just as much as human beings aspire to or admire or are in awe of the gods. So we're going to say a lot about that today. But so first of all, he desires Ganymede for his humanness, for his beauty, for his youth. And so he abducts Ganymede in the form of an eagle. He turns into an eagle. And in some versions of the story, he sends an eagle or he becomes an eagle. And he goes and he abducts Ganymede, takes him up to, Olympus. And so he takes him up to heaven. And then he gives him the position of the cupbearer. So the cupbearer is this super, super important role. I read actually several articles on the cupbearer, what a cupbearer is. And I think it's fascinating, but I'm just going to read you. I read a number of things about this, but here is something that I thought just summed it up really nicely, and it just comes from Wikipedia, but it summarizes what I read in several articles and the cupbearing role from Spain, from Greek mythology, from the Bible, from all different kinds of places. So the cupbearer was someone who had a high rank in royal courts, and their duty was to pour and serve the drinks at the royal table. Specifically, the cupbearer of the king would serve the king his drink. And remember that the king in the ancient world, in many places, many civilizations, is considered to be an incarnation of God. That's really important because remember, Zeus is like that too. And so Ganymede is a human who has the special privilege of being cupbearer to a god. Now, because of this is real Game of Thrones, if you watch Game of Thrones, the cupbearer is the one who also will drink or take what's in the cup to make sure that it's not poisoned. So the cupbearer potentially is a guardian of the king from poisoning. They will willingly drink and potentially take on the poison that might be intended for the king. That is fascinating, because then you have to really start thinking about this. First of all, why does a god want a human being? And second of all, why would a god have a human being guarding them against poison, especially when they're immortal, right? And some people might say, oh, you're thinking too much about this. No, these are important details that we actually need to think about. Also, there are many ways. I think there are a lot of ways that we can think about the fact that Zeus falls in love with a young boy, but the homoerotic quality of that story is also really important for a variety of different reasons. And I can't cover them all today, nor my life experience probably doesn't grant me the insight to speak to all of that. Other people probably could better than I. But there are some important things that we can say about the symbolism of that, the sort of homoerotic tension in that myth. And I'm going to just say a little bit about it today. The other thing so why does he abduct a human? Why is it a youthful boy? What is the homoerotic tension about? Why give him the position of a cupbearer? And why does an immortal god need a human being to potentially not only serve them, but guard against the poison, potentially guard them from the threat of poison? Why would a human need to take that on? Those are really, really key issues here. The other thing is that a cupbearer naturally can become quite close to the king and act as an advisor in a little bit of informal way, not like an official court advisor, like the hand of the king or something, but just that there's such a closeness and familiarity with the king that cupbearers would often become something of an advisor for a king. So we have a human who's desired and coveted, who's given where there's a little bit of a homoerotic nature or tension to the story, more or less pronounced in different versions of the myth. There are the cupbearer has this special position where he advises, counsels, protects the god. What is all of that about? And especially when you consider the normal way that we think about gods. The normal way we think about gods works like this, or God or the gods. We think gods are up here, and humans are down here. The gods have everything that humans have, but also a lot more. Whereas humans, we think of the gods as having everything that we have and a lot more. So the typical sort of linear hierarchy says human beings aspire to be more like God. Human beings worship and revere the gods. Human beings want to become immortal, right? And so there's like a movement upward. In many religious and spiritual traditions mirror that movement, and it is an archetypal one, in my opinion, which is not only valid and relevant, but an integral part of how we live and understand life and how we relate to the gods. We relate to them as emblems of what we aspire to be, and we seek the divine in that way as an upward ascensional path. However, it's really, really important because Aquarius in many ways is describing a different kind of path. It's like Aquarius has a different religious psychology going on, and it's super important. There's a quote from Heraclitus. This is representative of some of the ways in which ancient Greeks thought about the relationship between the gods and human beings in general. And one fragment of Heraclitus, who reads very much like a Western equivalent of the Tao Te Ching, by the way, his fragments do. He says this: gods live past our meager death. We die past their ceaseless living. Gods live past our meager death. We die past their ceaseless living. See, in this quote, there's something really important, and it's all wrapped up in this image of the cupbearer of Zeus, Ganymede, the water pourer, or the cupbearer. So when we really start thinking about what it means that Zeus would abduct this human, make him the cupbearer, all of these details, and then we take that quote into consideration: gods live past our meager death, we die past their ceaseless living. There are three implications that I think will help us start to welcome Pluto into Aquarius. There's a very deep transformative potential in the sort of innate psychology of this sign. So, number one, that divinity desires and even abducts humanity. This is really important. What it means is that rather than just that kind of linear hierarchical idea where it says, I'm down here, the gods are up there, the gods have everything I have plus more. This shifts things into a more reciprocal and relational intrigue between the gods and humans. It says, well, the gods don't have something that you have, which is namely your humanity. Remember, Aquarius was called a humane sign, and it was a sign that was related to that word humanity. What does it mean to be human? Well, from the gods' standpoint, it doesn't just mean to be like, oh, look at those little, apprentices, look at those miners down there. There is a thread running throughout not only ancient mythology in the Greek world, but all over the world that says that the gods are absolutely enamored by humanity, by what we are that they aren't. That by nature, where there is self and other, whether it's between mortals and immortals, or two mortals that fall in love, or gods and people, that there's always a sense that I am intrigued by what I am not, by what the other has that I do not. And what an immortal God cannot experience is the fruit that can only be tasted through the mortal adventure. The mortal adventure is like from the standpoint of Zeus's desire for Ganymede. You could say that the mortal adventure is one that it's a taste that Zeus is just intrigued by, right? Wow, you get to experience all of these dualities, there's this contrast between light and dark, between life and death. You die. You live and you die. Wow. Like that is something that is not just, oh, poor you. Oh, if only you were immortal. But that's also looked at as, wow, that is beautiful. And so inherent in the desire that Zeus has for Ganymede, and inherent in the humane sign of Aquarius, the sign that celebrates and sanctifies our humanity, there is a sense of appreciation from the gods toward human beings for their humanness, that it is desired, our humanness, by the gods in some sense, just as much as we can idealize what it must be like to be a god. And it's really, really important, because without that, the exchange, the actual appreciation can't occur. I mean, do you want to date someone who's just your superior? Not really. Maybe there's some things that they have that you don't have. But what we're really looking for is complementarity, right? We want to be complementing each other. I have things you don't have. You have things I don't have. And so let's enjoy and experience each other. And so from this standpoint, Zeus abducts Ganymede because humanity is desirable, is beautiful. I think that's really, really important. However, there's also a little bit of a darkness here, because Zeus abducts Ganymede, takes him away against his will. And this is why we have our grabbed series, because the planets all the time, the Indian astrologers called them grahas. The planets grab us, they seize us. And an unexamined life is a life often being lived by the gods through us. And we're living with the illusion that we have free will or agency, that we are actually using our consciousness and agency, that actually the gods are just utilizing us. Zeus rules the liver, the moon rules the stomach or the breasts, Venus, the voice. And we think I'm living a life and I'm doing all of these things, but actually the gods are using us, right, for their own joys and pleasures. And so in that sense, we're being abducted all the time by the gods. We're being abducted by higher powers that live through us, and we pretend to understand what we're doing, or we pretend like we're the ones in control. And all the time, what we call fate, the play of the gods, is just acting out on the stage of our life. So there is a sense in which these gods can abduct us because of their attraction to our lives. They get to vicariously live out a mortal experience through us. And our souls are the very mediation space for these archetypes, these gods, which is why it's also very important that we develop some sense of relationship with them, some awareness of them. Because when we do, even though, there's a way in which we start to see, man, the gods are, they are having a show down here. They're having a nice romp, and they're especially loving to do it, through us human beings. It's kind of you start to see that and you go, okay, well, I'd like some agency, and I think that's why it's so interesting that Ganymede is not just, he's abducted, but he's desired. So it's like kind of the tension of both of those things. But then he holds this very special position, cupbearer to the god. That's interesting. That is interesting, because then we take on a position of importance. There is a relationship with the god that is forming. And on the one hand, you might say, well, it's still just a servant. It's like a menial role. Anyone, could do it. But no, because Ganymede is select. Ganymede stands out somehow from the rest. And there is something quite naturally that sets us apart. Ganymede is kind of a lonely figure, and even a figure that could garner the jealousy or angst or like ire of human beings. Well, what's so special about you that you get abducted by Zeus, that you have this special role with the gods? Generally speaking, people who start to recognize the presence of the gods and develop a relationship with them, where many, many people are being played around by them unconsciously, the person who is aware of the gods becomes resented, misunderstood, outcast, alienated, all things that are often associated with Saturn's rulership of Aquarius, the outcast or the black sheep. But the one who may have some uncommon understanding, some uncommon, some uncommonly personal way in which the gods are enacting their dramas, you know? So the other thing that's really important is that number two, which is that humanity drinks the poison and protects divinity. This is also really deep. It's not a simple thing to consider, because again, you'd say, well, what does an immortal god have to fear in a cup of poison? Like, they can't die. Well, that's exactly what the poison represents. That's exactly what the god can't do or doesn't want to do, or is terrified of and drawn to at the same exact time: mortality. That's what a cup of poison represents to a god. And so the human, as a cupbearer, becomes the drinker of the poison of mortality. And on behalf of who? On behalf of the Godhead. So what that means, in a sense, is that each one of us, in the lives we are living, in the things we are called to love, in the way that the archetypes play themselves out on the stages of our lives, we are cupbearers. We are drinking the poison on behalf of divinity. And that's really, really important, because it's in that sense that humanity is also not just a lesser, lower being in need of the higher God, but it validates, it sanctifies, it offers a kind of salvation. And I mean that in like not so literal, not in a literal way. But what's saving about humanity is that humanity, we through our lives, knowingly or not, we're drinking the poison of mortality. We live that experience, but we do it unknowingly or knowingly, and better if it's knowingly. We do it on behalf of the gods, so that the gods can play out their lives through us and in us, because their natural position is one of immortality. It's a mortal that has to carry the dance of the gods in the mortal frame. That's what's so beautiful about humanity. There's something inherently sacrificial about humanity, that we're able to carry something of a godlike nature, but we're able to do it in a mortal framework, whereas the gods cannot. They're limited by their own immortality. And this is exactly why Heraclitus says, gods live past our meager death. We die past their ceaseless living. So there's a reciprocity there. It's the exact same thing that's happening on a symbolic, alchemical level. Don't take it literally. I'm not trying to recruit anyone for Christ here, right? But think about the symbolism in the Garden of Gethsemane with Jesus, who is the son, the special youth, the chosen youth of the Godhead, the Father, like Zeus. He's a very Ganymede-like character in a way. He says, if it is possible for someone else to bear this cup, please take it from me. I don't want to bear this cup. So, and remember, this is the idea of God becoming a human being, becoming flesh. And in that becoming human, tasting mortality, tasting evil and darkness, tasting death and injustice, tasting those things and taking it on and sort of trembling before it. It is so important that we understand in this story, this kind of religious psychology of Aquarius, if you want to call it that the Godhead needs the human being to carry the cup. There's something so, and in that sense, our humanity is given a place that is just as divine as the gods above. Now, there's also, that does not mean, that's not like permission to develop hubris. It's not permission being given somehow to, go off and act destructively. But it's rather an invitation into a reciprocal relationship of service. Because the exchange is that while we taste the cup of mortality that the gods can't taste, and we do that on behalf of the gods, we also get our lives enriched by the gods. What gives beauty to our lives, what gives truth to our lives, what gives wonder and intimacy and fear and all the texture of life that makes it so profound are the gods. The gods in their archetypal forms come in and create the stagecraft of our lives. and we bear the cup in order to experience it. So there's a deep reciprocity, and this is it's a beautiful way of no. So anyway, I'm just so, these insights for me they've touched my heart so deeply as of late, and it's hard to put into words exactly how. But so the other thing that's worth mentioning here is that where does that homoerotic tension come in? Well, I think that there's two different ways of thinking about it. And, one is, the word homo, it points to a kind of sameness. And so it makes sense to me, just on a metaphorical level, that Ganymede, that some of the ways that this myth has been talked about have pointed to or tried to draw out the homoerotic tension potentially between Zeus and the young boy. But I don't think of it as literally about. I mean, I think you can. There's a lot of ways to take meaning and a lot of value from the homosexual nature of that part of the myth. But I also think of it as a metaphor that's applicable for everyone. And that metaphor is that there's something of the tension of two things that are different but the same, right? A god and a mortal. But then where the you could say the homo piece comes in is that although it appears as though there are, the gods are very different from people, that in this myth there's a way in which they're actually the same. We bear the cup of the gods, and the gods in turn give us the ecstasy that is the living of life, the destiny and the fate, all of it. So I think that the homoerotic piece of the myth seems to point to some way in which there is a secret sameness between us and the gods, though we play very different roles. I think there's a lot more that can be said about that, so I'm certainly not trying to like, oh, that's what that means and that's just it. But to me, that's a big piece of it. In a sense, what this means too is that Aquarius celebrates our humanity. It says, yes, it's of course the gods are beautiful, and of course we worship them, because without them, what would life be? And so the reverence toward the divine is essential to Aquarius, because the cupbearer is, after all, a servant. If we start looking at our lives as a cup-bearing service to the gods, we can say, what would you have with me? What do you want from my life? And think of Pluto entering Aquarius, how deeply transformative it might be if we look to the gods and say, look, my life is just your stage play. What can I do to serve you? I am your cupbearer. How can I bear this life for you so that you may enjoy the fruits of who I am, of this mortal experience, right? What can I do for you? And then, what's amazing is that it's that spirit of generosity that immediately engenders this reciprocal dynamic of care, the gods caring for us and us caring for the gods, in a way that eliminates the strictly hierarchical distinction. Gods are everything I am plus more. No, we start to embrace and inhabit. Gods live past our meager death. We die past their ceaseless living. It's just a beautiful thing to embody. It's a different kind of understanding of who we are as human beings. This is why in some cases Aquarians, and this is point number 3, although they have this oftentimes really profound understanding of what humanity is, an appreciation for humanity's unique and divine role in the cosmos, mediators of the cupbearers of the gods. My God, isn't humanity beautiful? There's no sign that sort of fully embodies that more than Aquarius. But it is this very realization about what we are that so few people have. so few of us really embrace and understand what humanity is. If we live under the idea that I am down here, the gods have all that I have and more, and let's say that plays out on the stages of our lives in an unspiritual way, then we are worshiping and saying, well, I could be more in terms of money, I could be more in terms of power, I could be more in terms of fame, blah blah blah. And even in religious life, we might have a sense of venerating the gods as above us, which is okay, but we may also lack the intimacy that can only come with the familiarity and celebration of our own nature. Right. And so it's like, yeah, well, there's not a lot of human beings that actually understand the significance and beauty of our humanity, which is a weird irony, because to recognize this sense of who we are as human beings inherently makes you stand out. And it can be very lonely and isolating and alienating to stand out from others, because there's a sense in which you are able to recognize the divine nature of your own humanity. And that's a lonely path. It's the path of heretics. People, you're not venerating the gods. You're common with the gods. You think that you have some special thing with the gods. Well, then you're out of the hierarchy. You're a heretic. Or you think that you have some special relationship with the gods. You're odd. You're strange. You're weird. Remember, Ganymede is not only a character that is, taken by Zeus because he's beautiful and because he desires him, but because he's unique in some way. And that's a sense in which humanity, that is what humanity is: unique, beautiful. But so few of us actually have inherited the gift of that realization. And it's saving. It's actually, it is a recognition of, when you realize that, it's grace, it's mercy, it's forgiveness, it's tolerance, it's letting go of shame. It's just a moment where you can say, I am beautiful just as it's very Mr. Rogers. I am beautiful just the way I am as a human. But as soon as you recognize that, there's a way in which it can set you apart. Humanity's relationship with the gods. And once you start to recognize this kind of reciprocal exchange, our position as cupbearers, right? Well, then immediately lonely and potentially alienating. And people can be jealous of Ganymede. As Plato said in the Republic, when people get out into the light of the real world and they try to go back into the cave and talk to people about it, people might even try to kill that person. Heretics, outcasts, black sheep, people who, somehow don't fit in or fit the part. The other thing is, of course, that we can try to mirror this in a lot of different ways. A lot of the times we want to say, well, I am special just the way I am, and so I'm going to get a tattoo, and so I'm going to dress a certain way, and so I'm going to call myself a certain thing, and so I'm going to do this or that, just to really stick it to everyone and be like, I'm good the way that I am. To be careful of that too, because I suspect that is not the quality that had Zeus fly down and bring Ganymede up to make Ganymede the cupbearer. It's actually the humble, simple willingness to love what we love. I'm going to read the poem by Mary Oliver called Wild Geese, which you've heard me read before, but it's such an embodiment of this Aquarian spirit. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. It's amazing how the more that we know our place, that we know that our special place as humans is a sanctified, blessed, beautiful space. The gods act out their powers through us, which give us the richness that is our lives. And in turn, we give them the joy and thrill of a mortal experience, and that there's a deep reciprocation there. When you realize that, it is something that liberates us from guilt and shame. It's something that liberates us from the sense of struggle and merit and effort. And it says instead, live a life that is filled with those things you love. Because your love, the things that you love in the spirit of truth, in a humble but persistent way, the things that you're devoted to, the things that you just love, those are the things that the gods place in your life. It is their joy that we're experiencing in that moment. And when we live those things in a mortal framework, we're doing a great service to the gods. This is the Aquarian perspective, in a sense. And there's a great sense of relief that comes with that. Oh, my humanity is blessed. So that's where I'm at with the water bearer. And what I'm excited for with Pluto moving into Aquarius is the idea that our lives can be so deeply and profoundly transformed by these very insights and realizations. And they are going to happen over 2 decades, and how will they affect the institutions of our world? How will they affect our personal lives and relationships, our career paths? I suspect that there will be a lot that comes a lot that comes up for us around how special and beautiful it is to be human, and how alienating and challenging it can be to embrace a deeply accepting perspective of our humanness. So anyway, we'll say a lot more, but I hope that this has been useful for everybody when it comes to just starting to prepare ourselves for Pluto entering the sign of the cupbearer, the water pourer. All right, that's what I've got for today. I hope you guys are having a great day. Leave a comment. Tell me what you guys think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. I look forward to reading what you guys have to say. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.